Inside Outlook is proudly supported by the Evans School of Public Affairs at the University of Washington, leading the field in public policy and management education, research and service for more than 50 years.
Immigration. As a nation founded and propelled by immigrants, it fundamentally defines us as a country. And yet, it is one of our most politically divisive issues. The reality is there are over 40 million immigrants living in America today. Of those, over 11 million are undocumented. Today on Inside Outlook, we look at the state of immigration in America and the Northwest. Stay tuned. Welcome Mike Gempler, Executive Director, Washington Growers League, Jorge Barron, Executive Director, Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, Toby Gavon, Advocacy Director, One America, Ira Melman, Media Director, FAIR. There are over 40 million immigrants living in America today. Over 11 million are doing so undocumented. The vast majority of these undocumented immigrants originate from Mexico and Central America. I want to start off by looking at just, what is driving this influx of migration to the United States, and specifically from these regions?
Number one is opportunity. I think there's opportunity that exists in the United States that is not available in a lot of people's home countries, so I think that's one. I think number two is persecution. People are being persecuted, and they come to the United States to seek refuge.
Our organization does a lot of work with people who are undocumented and trying to figure out what options they have under our current immigration laws. And I think the majority of the people that we see would have preferred to have stayed in their home countries if they'd had, a certain level of opportunity, as Toby indicated, or if they had been safe.
There are a couple of other factors I think we need to look at here that's driving this. You have obviously the push factors, the poor economies in those countries, and the pull factors, the desire of a lot of industries in this country to hire lower cost labor. The United States will provide the jobs, the United States will provide all the social services, and by the way, send back billions of dollars in remittances every year. And inadvertently, what we have been doing for a long time is enabling those social conditions and political and economic conditions to just perpetuate themselves.
Do you think it's a conscious effort on those powers that be in these countries that allow this situation to continue?
Yes, and they're rather open about it.
How does it compare with other waves of immigration in U.S. history?
The phrase of, this being a country of immigrants is just factually the reality, right? And so I think that the fact that people have been coming here for better opportunities and fleeing, persecution and fleeing, lack of economic opportunity has been the history of this country, right? From the very beginning, from the Pilgrims on down.
First of all, with regard to being a nation of immigrants, every nation is a nation of immigrants. I don't know any place on earth where people actually sprung from the ground. At some point in every nation's history, there has been migration, and at some point people said, things have changed, conditions have changed, and to simply say, well, because we did this 100 or 200 years ago, that we should continue to do it without ever thinking about it, that also doesn't make very much sense. What we need to recognize is that immigration always benefits immigrants. Nobody comes to this country legally or illegally unless it's in their interest to be here, and substantially so.
So what steps should be taken?
There's proposals at the federal level. The Senate passed a bill last year that would provide a pathway for a percentage of those undocumented immigrants to gain access to legal status and eventual citizenship. There have been some steps taken more recently by President Obama through executive action to provide opportunities for folks to remain, to get access to work permits and to continue contributing.
To address your question, I think it's twofold. I think we want to make it harder for people to come here illegally. But I think we also want to make it easier for people to come here legally for good reasons. Because I think the way our immigration system is designed right now, it does not allow for some common sense immigration for economic reasons, for jobs, and so on. And we need to change the tone of our immigration system so it does recognize different kinds of needs and reasons for coming here.
But any system that you set up, there are always going to be people who are going to be left on the outside looking in, and there won't be an opportunity for them. You're still going to have people who are going to be said, we're going to get the answer no. What we need, and to some degree I agree with Mike, is a system that selects people based on some rational assessment of what the needs of the country are at any particular time.
We certainly would not say that it's a problem to have increased opportunities for people to come to the United States because of economic reasons, but we don't see why it has to be, pitted against family relationships and to say, well, I can't bring my spouse or I can't bring my son to the United States because somebody needs to have a certain level of work or certain master's degree.
What we're talking about is the extended families, the siblings, and that's where you're really getting to the endless chains. You come, then you petition for your siblings, they bring their spouses who petition for their siblings, and your no good brother-in-law might want to come, but he may not be of any use to the country.
In any family, you might have some people that you might not appreciate, but I think most of the people that are coming to this country are making a huge contribution. I think all the statistics show that.
Dive a little bit into the proposals that passed the Senate a year ago in 2014. What prevented that from moving forward?
It wasn't a very good deal for the American people. It was basically a replay of what happened in 1986, which was we'll give amnesty to the people who are here illegally, and we will promise the American public that next time we'll really get serious about this. Well, in 1986 we legalized about 3 million people, and the government never kept its promises to the American people. We had even higher levels of illegal immigration than we had before. And there's no reason to believe that they're going to do any better this time.
Toby, in One America's, what was your guys' take on that proposal?
We were supportive of the proposal. We wish that it went a little bit further, but I think when you get to the American people, you had bipartisan support in the Senate, and you had enough votes in the House to pass the bill. And so Speaker Boehner wasn't willing to bring that comprehensive bill up for a vote, which was unfortunate because it would have provided an opportunity to strike that balance in a lot of cases.
One thing that's really being overlooked here is E-Verify. And that bill was moving us towards E-Verify. And if you have mandatory use of E-Verify at the time of hire, it is a sea change. And once you require employers to use a database when they're hiring people to check their documents, it essentially closes the loophole, if you will, that was in IRCA, the Immigration Reform and Control Act of '86, which established a standard for employers of having to visually examine documents to determine if they appeared to be genuine on their face.
But it wouldn't kick in from a decade or so. In the meantime, everybody who would get the amnesty would keep that amnesty, and if the government didn't follow through on its promise, like it's not followed through on countless other promises, well, that's too bad.
But then, Ira, what do you do? Again, it gets back to this question about the 11 million undocumented immigrants. Obama's been the deporter-in-chief in deporting upwards of 2 million people. So you would like to see that go further?
Yeah. Well, first of all, he's not been the deporter-in-chief. They're doing some funny math here, like they do in a lot of things. They're counting people that they stop at the border and put back as deportees. They transfer them to ICE so the ICE can get credit for the deportations. In fact, removals are way down under Obama, but that's a separate issue. So what do you do about
In fact, way down under Obama?
Yes.
Would you guys agree with that?
No.
No.
I would say that interior enforcement, the issuance of warrants for people who have violated deportation hearings, that kind of thing, we never used to have them. We had field raids, as they were called, under previous administrations, Clinton and Bush, but never this, serving of warrants, going out to places of businesses, stores, and so forth, looking for people, grabbing them and going. Did not have that. If you look at what happened in the 90s, where we had this policy and conflict, and I think the federal government was complicit in this. We had two signs at the border, as they say, one that said keep out, and one that said help wanted. People were coming across and they were getting jobs, and they were adding to the economy, they were serving their own needs as well. they're good members of the community. It just seems very destructive to adopt a policy to try and move them out.
Well, in addition to E-Verify, in addition to a stronger Border Patrol, I mean, path to citizenship. I mean, is it a non-starter issue, Ira?
Well, for us it is. All you do is encourage more people to violate the law if you reward it. You know, we saw that in 1986. You see it, you know, not just in immigration, but in other areas. What we need to do is start from the premise that those laws are there to protect the vital interests of the American people. And we have to remember, illegal immigrants do not provide cheap labor. They provide subsidized labor. The direct employer gets a low-wage worker. Everybody else in society has to pay for the social costs of having those individuals here.
Virtually everybody agrees that the immigration system is broken and that we need immigration reform that provides a pathway to citizenship. There are still folks who don't want to see that happen, but Ira brought up labor. Labor is supportive, community is supportive, faith is supportive, business is supportive. It's the details of the policy that people disagree on, but people are united in supporting immigration reform that provides a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants.
One of the things that I'm hopeful about, when those programs are allowed to move forward, is that it will enable people to, be more open about their situation, and I think that will change the dynamic for a lot of people. Because right now, a lot of people are undocumented. They're working. They're in our congregations. They're in our workplaces, but they can't be open about it because of the fact that they don't have legal status. At the end of the day, we make a decision that it's actually not in the best interest of the country to do that.
Our work is to be outside the detention center every weekend to connect with families, therefore to connect with detainees. And so once we get in touch with one detainee, we're able to be in touch with other detainees as well. To organize inside the detention center, you need really strong people. We know that ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, and GEO, the corporation that runs the detention center, their role is to break people's spirit. It's to make them believe that they're not only detained, they're imprisoned, both physically and mentally. So in order for people to organize in such conditions, they have to be extremely, extremely strong or really, really tired of what's going on. I know that being outspoken and fighting in my community like I've done for the past 15 years puts me at risk, but I've always believed that I'm doing a civic duty. Although I'm not recognized as a US citizen, I am a US citizen because I've been doing work that most citizens wouldn't even do. So I'm willing to take the risk because I believe that somebody has to do it, and I don't want to live in fear anymore. And I want my daughter and other children to see that, we are willing to risk everything. For the longest time, I wanted to share my status. I wanted to tell people, no, I'm not a US citizen. I'm an undocumented immigrant like you. So let's do it together. But I also felt afraid at that level until I got really tired of it. And I said, enough is enough. I have to share my story. I have to tell people I'm undocumented. So I learned how to share my story after all these years. And it's not an easy one because it's not easy to say that you're fighting for your family, and after 20 years things don't change, and I'm actually one of the lucky ones. My daughter is a US citizen. Every time I travel or I go out, we need to be in touch all the time. We're texting, we're calling, how are you, where are you? So it's not easy to leave thinking, what if I'm not with my daughter anymore? What if I have to leave? And I want my daughter to actually be able to go out one day and not having to text me so many times throughout the day. I just want her to also feel free. She's a US citizen and she doesn't feel free either.
A 2013 Gallup poll found that the majority of Americans support various elements that would have comprised the comprehensive immigration reform that passed the Senate. I guess I'm having a hard time understanding again why there was so much resistance.
There was also a Gallup poll that came out in the summer of 2014 that said 70% of the Americans see the current immigration system as a threat to their way of life. So, polling all depends on how you ask questions. It's usually posed as an either-or. In fact, we have done polling in which we give the other option, which is voluntary compliance or self-deportation, and that actually polls very well among the American people. So it depends what the choices are that you give to the American people based on, resulting in what kind of answers that they give. So look, I think most Americans understand that what we have now is unsustainable.
The fact that there's a lot of political support, I mean, the 2013 bill in the Senate got 68 votes. I mean, how many things get 68 votes in these days? That's not naming a post office. And I think everybody understands that if that had been allowed to go to a full vote in the House, it would have passed by a substantial margin. And it's one of those situations, and unfortunately in our political system, frequently things that are good for the majority of people, but people are not sufficiently motivated to be calling the congressman, but you have a very vocal minority, of energized minority, are able to block things in our political system, and it's unfortunate. It happens in many other areas of law.
Would you consider yourself a part of that vocal minority?
Well, I suppose, but Jorge is right. It probably would have passed because the Republicans were bought off, or some of the Republicans were bought off by the fact that it meant more cheap labor for the business constituency. Look, you have to remember, the largest single lobbying organization pushing for this bill was the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, because they saw more, not cheap labor, but subsidized labor. So, for two completely different reasons, both parties were willing and ready to sell out the interests of the American people.
What can be done on a state level in addressing some of these issues? I mean, obviously there's certain constraints on reform that can happen on a state level and what we can do.
There's a proposal right now that's being considered by the legislature called the Washington Family Unity Act, which is to try to disentangle local law enforcement from immigration enforcement matters, which has been a significant problem, and it creates a lot of bad situations where people are not willing to come forward and report criminal activity.
Nobody but the feds can really pass and implement any immigration law. But a lot of states have tried. What I see is this technological noose that's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. You have real ID, you have driver's license requirements where people are required to give social security numbers, things like that in different local governments around the country, where there's an attempt by local and state politicians to essentially create immigration enforcement. And it just throws everything out of whack without decisive action by the federal government.
I want to talk a little bit about labor, impact on the economy, and in particular the Yakima Valley and the shortage of the agricultural workforce. How are you guys dealing with that, and how does this play into this conversation?
Currently, our only option is a temporary visa program known as the H-2A program. And there's been a dramatic increase in the use of that program in the state over the past few years. It is a highly imperfect program. It's driven by employers. The employers have to apply for permission to hire somebody from another country if and only if Americans don't want the job. And the U.S. Department of Labor grants the permission. It is fairly costly, doesn't work well for a lot of farms, especially smaller farms.
In addition to the general amnesty, there was a special agricultural amnesty for people who had worked in agriculture. And guess what? Those people got their green cards. They said, bye-bye, we're leaving. We're not going to do these jobs under these conditions at these wages. So agriculture has a problem here that they're going to need to figure out. Simply repeating what we did in 1986, we have empirical evidence that once the people get their green cards, they can go to work for, building Paul Allen's, build skyscrapers in Seattle. They're not sticking around on the farm.
Well, that's not entirely true. I mean, it happened to a great extent, but there are, tens of thousands of people who would stay in agriculture who are probably foremen and managers who have health insurance benefits and run the farm.
How do you guys look at this issue moving forward? Talking to our audience here, glimmers, shimmers of hope? I mean, how do we start to resolve this issue that seems to never go away?
We also need to think about a little bit more from a global perspective. We do need to think of ways that we can actually improve conditions in some of the places and be more engaged. I mean, certainly, for example, what we see in Central America with the levels of violence and some of our own policies contributing to lack of stability and lack of economic opportunity.
I do agree, but we also have to recognize the limits. As we've seen recently, we're not really good at nation building. And look, I mean, it's a bit of hubris for us to believe that we can somehow solve all the problems of Mexico or Central America. That's not going to happen. Ultimately, it's got to be up to the people in those countries to fix what ails them. We can be helpful. What we need to do is make sure that American workers have access to jobs in this country, that our social institutions can provide for the needs of people in this country. We can have mass immigration, or we can have higher wages and better social conditions, but we can't have both together.
Well, I think there is a lot of hope. I think the political landscape is changing, the demographics of the country are changing, and I think the window is narrowing. I think it's a question of when, not if. And so I think it's going to take some political courage from elected officials. It may not happen in the very short term, but I think the medium-term goal of getting comprehensive immigration reform that provides some of the things that we talked about, that the overwhelming majority of the American people, and then when you look at the a rising American electorate, those folks, young people, people of color, immigrants and refugees, the support for immigration reform and related policies is incredibly high.
There's too much common sense on the side of action, and there are too many people who want something to happen for this to be bottled up indefinitely. So I have hope that we're going to get there within the next 5 to 10 years, and hopefully sooner than that.
Well, we'll leave it at that. I want to thank you all for joining us at Inside Outlook.
Inside Outlook is made possible by support from the Evans School of Public Affairs at the University of Washington.